Today I'm going to be doing an April recap, and it's a pretty diverse one. As always, I'll give you the quick synopsis, my rundown, my personal take from the book, what I rated it, and who I would recommend it to. The Passion According to G.H. Now, I've been trying to get into more of Clarice Lispector's work. I have read 2 other books by her and I didn't really love either one of them. I'm not giving up on her necessarily because I find the way that she writes in this sort of like prose, airy, flowing, not really having like a strict plot and explanation to how we get from here to there. I kind of like the way that she writes like that. I find it interesting and captivating, but I also find it so hard to read because I almost never know what's going on. And that's kind of, I feel like, how she wants it. The Passion According to G.H. is basically a woman having a complete and total existential crisis breakdown after encountering a cockroach in her maid's room. Honestly, if I saw a cockroach anywhere, I would probably have a little bit of a breakdown, especially in my own house. But that's essentially the entire plot for this book. A lady having a breakdown over a cockroach. It's a dense book. There's a lot of internal monologue and philosophical musings about religion and metaphysical kind of themes. Not very much action happens. I could not really stay emotionally connected to it, and I didn't really feel like I learned anything or that my mind had changed on any of the positions that were brought into question. The language is intense and it felt almost hypnotic. I rated it 3 out of 5. I would recommend this if you like her other work. This is probably the easiest one out of hers to really grasp and understand. There's like a little bit of a plot in there. I would also recommend this if you like stream of consciousness books. Then I read Bibliophobia. This is a memoir. It's basically a memoir about someone who deeply loves books and is also kind of ambivalent about what books and reading means in her life, and also wants to write a book but didn't know what to write about, so it felt like she was failing at this great big master plan for her life. It is a mix between memoir and literary criticism of certain books. It also deeply goes into these books, tells you the entire plot and explains everything that happens in the book pretty much, and then talks about how she related that book to her life. I felt like the literary criticism really took me out of the memoir part of the book, and I found it hard to keep pace while reading. Instead of reading straight through, I was jarred between memoir, past, present, future, whatever, musings to this woman's life, and then here's a book that I read, and then we're going right back to alcoholism or self-harm. So I was not able to keep a even pace of reading throughout the entire book. The premise is really solid and I loved certain thoughts that the author put into this memoir, but overall I just felt very lost and unfortunately unsatisfied at the end of the book. I rated it a 2 out of 5. I would recommend this to you if you are an academic or if you like books about books. I would recommend you skip it if you're looking for a emotionally driven memoir about how books change someone's life. I Remain in Darkness. Every month, I think I've said this, that this author, Annie, is going to be probably one of my favorite authors of the year. I Remain in Darkness is the account of Annie watching her mother slowly deteriorate from Alzheimer's. It's fairly short. I think it's about 60 pages in length. But in that short amount of writing, it carries so much emotional weight. It really captured the grief, the sadness, the guilt, the frustration that comes with being someone's caretaker. There was no real over-explanation of feelings or emotions. It was straight to the point. I was able to feel everything without being forced by the author to be sentimental to what was happening. I rated this a 4 out of 5, and I would recommend this if you like explorations of emotion or grief or caregiving. And it's also pretty perfect if you don't have the mental band to read a long book, but you still want something that's emotional and might leave you feeling a little sad or leave you feeling a little comforted that someone else was able to also feel the emotions that you feel. And I followed I Remain in Darkness with Blue Nights by Joan Didion, which I rated a 3 out of 5. This is a memoir written by Didion of her grieving the loss of her daughter, and also semi-reflecting on aging, and also reflecting on adoption. While this is a memoir that's really geared towards the loss of Joan Didion's daughter, it also is so strongly about the ups and downs and difficulties that parents go through when they adopt children and children go through when they become adopted. It's definitely written in a way that is focused on memory, how we remember things and how that might differ from what actually happened, and how our memory changes over time. The ending of this book was the strongest part to me, and I liked the very quiet kind of devastation that the entire book had. It made me reflect a lot on the relationships that I currently have with people and that I had with people in the past. It also made me feel like I should be a little bit braver in what I do and what I say, because the only time that we really have is now. I would recommend this to anyone who enjoys slow, reflective memoirs, or anybody who's a fan of Joan Didion's style. I would not recommend this to anybody who's looking for a plot-driven memoir or a sort of chronological style memoir. This is definitely more of a mood book than it is a plot book. And then I read The Unworthy, and I think I've come to the realization that this author is just not the author for me. There's not anything necessarily wrong with her writing. I am just unimpressed with The Unworthy and Tender is the Flesh. I feel like the horror or grossness or disgustingness that she has in her book, or she uses as a sort of hook, is essentially just that. It's just to grab people's attention, but it doesn't come full circle and have a true actual point to the writing. I think this is a dystopian novel. It's set in some kind of future broken world where their life is ruled by religion and cruelty, and a sort of decay that's going on in the nature of the world. It gives the reader almost no exposition. You have to figure out the world as you're going. It doesn't really give you anything. It doesn't tell you what happened or why things are that way. You just have to be there and experience it as you read. And I think that is the big problem for me. I don't really love this approach. I don't want to just be thrown into the middle of a plot and then kind of piece together everything that's happened. I'm fine working for my read. I'm okay with just a little bit of like unexplained kind of plot, but I don't want the entire world to be this world that I don't currently live in and then not be explained anything at all about that. The writing felt repetitive at times and overly padded. I think the beginning had the most promise for me, and then it just fell apart at the end. I rated it a 2.5 out of 5. I would recommend this book to you if you like this dystopian style of novel, if you liked Tender is the Flesh, if you like It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. This kind of post-apocalyptic, no guide book. I would skip it if you like your sci-fi dystopian books to have clear rules and high emotional payoff. The Lover. This is a slight autobiography of a young French girl who enters into a relationship with a wealthy Chinese man. It's sensual, haunting, explores memory, race, power dynamics, but was overall fairly short and a little confusing. So I'm torn on what I want to rate this book. It's somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4, I think. The story was very captivating and sad, but in a beautiful way. But the prose just sometimes lost me, and I don't know if that's due to translation or the structure of the novel, but still the book lingered in my mind after I finished reading it. I would recommend this to people who like lyrical prose or memory-based narratives, but I would tell you to approach it with a little bit of patience, or maybe lower your expectations of how shocking the book will be. Then I read my second Joan Didion of the month, The Year of Magical Thinking, and I rated it a 3 out of 5. This is Didion's memoir about how she felt throughout the year after her husband passed away. It's definitely a more medical style memoir because it talks way more about grief and the things that can happen to your body and also psychologically after you experience something traumatic. I think if I had read this before Blue Nights, I might have liked it a little bit more, but it felt less emotional to me than Blue Nights did. I would recommend this to people who are trying to understand their grief and they want to intellectualize the process instead of feel it out. And I would skip it if you're looking for that emotional release, and I would recommend Blue Nights instead. Devotion by Patti Smith. I think this is my only 5 out of 5 stars for last month. This is a little book. It's a mix of journal entries and travel thoughts. Right in the middle is a short story that she actually journals about writing in the beginning part of the book. And I really loved this. Her short story was a little weird and strange, but the entire book felt like watching someone in process of completing a project, which I really loved and really enjoyed kind of experiencing. I would definitely recommend this to anybody who is a creative person or a writer, or just in general anybody who's a fan of Patti Smith's work. And I would not recommend it to anybody who doesn't really like experimentative kind of journalistic writing styles. Tennis lessons. And don't be fooled by the title because there is literally like this much tennis that goes on in this book. Instead, it's a coming-of-age novel about a young girl who's growing up and experiencing all different sort of regular life experiences, like awkward relationships or troubles with their parents, or some really gross things like ingrown toenails, a lot of puke, and sort of like questionable friendships overall. It wasn't bad. It held my attention the entire book. The structure is interesting. It's sort of day by day entries spanning from when she was a young girl to when she was an adult, and it's kind of just the days that are the most important and probably shaped this person's life into what it is at the time of the book ending. It was a super quick read, it was super easy, and it's probably a skippable read in my opinion. I rated it a 2 out of 5, and I would recommend it if you like that kind of offbeat, sort of awkward girl book. The Man Who Saw Everything. This book follows a historian who gets hit by a car in 1988 and then again in 2016, maybe. It's a very slippery sort of narrative about memory and history and perception with plenty of Beatles references, which I did enjoy, and also some queer subtext in it. I liked the book. The twist was fairly predictable to me. It is essential to the story, the plot line. So even if you figure it out, it's still something that you should keep reading because the ending is even better than the beginning. And also this is a book where none of the characters are super likable, but it's definitely intentional. I'd recommend it to you if you like unreliable narrators, or books where you kind of have to play the detective, where the author is giving you kind of clues about maybe what's really going on and you have to piece it together yourself. I would avoid it if you like neat conclusions or neat storylines and emotionally grounded characters, and I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. The Repeat Room. I'm unsure what to rate this. I believe it's between a 3 and a 2.5. This is a kind of futuristic novel where the jury system is changed to where a group of people are selected and they're put through different trials to see which one person is going to decide the fate of one other person, the criminal and then the like regular person. I think the main theme of The Repeat Room is, can someone be held accountable for doing something wrong if they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong? It's a very interesting premise, and I really did enjoy this kind of experience of the trials that people are put through to decide if they are the one juror that is selected to decide someone else's fate. But I felt like the ending sort of collapsed under its own weight. It was sort of reaching for something profound and deep, but it never actually got there, for me at least. I would recommend this to you if you enjoy Black Mirror or any sort of people moral experiment kind of book. I would not recommend this to anybody who needs that satisfying conclusion. Paradise Logic. This book is pure brain rot in a way that I think was actually kind of good. It's a book about girlhood and relationships and being the best girlfriend you can be, but also being the best person you can be, detachment, and also the absurdity of being a girl online and IRL. The writing is very modern, very, very brain rot online style writing and jokes. It's a little unhinged in total. I enjoyed it because it didn't take itself too seriously. It wasn't trying to be more than it was. It wasn't trying to say something profound in a profound way. It just kind of accidentally made enough stupid TikTok online jokes that it ended up being sort of profound in a stupid way. I would not recommend it if you hate brain rot jokes, or any book that sounds like a Twitter thread, or anything where you're gonna have to Urban Dictionary what it means. I would skip it if you do not want to do that. And I rated it a 4 out of 5 just because it was so easy to read, and I actually found myself enjoying what I was reading and kind of laughing at all of the stupid jokes. The next book I read is an ARC, so thanks to Astra House for approving my e-ARC via NetGalley. This was Blowfish, and it's actually one of the books I was most excited for that is releasing later this year. It follows two people who are connected by a creative space and also by a past of people who have commit suicide. There is very little dialogue in this story, but it does switch point of views between those two people, so you do get the full kind of thought process behind both of the characters. But a lot of it is memory and thoughts and description of places. I was very nervous that it wouldn't deliver, that the translation would not be good and strong, or that it would just not be a book that was all that it was hyped up to be. But it absolutely did. I wish there was more conversation between the characters just in general, but I think that what was trying to be said did get through in the end of the book. So I rated it a 4 out of 5. I would recommend this to anybody who likes literary fiction that is sort of quiet and character driven, but not really for anybody who likes dialogue heavy books or plot heavy books. And the last book I read in April, which took me about a week and a half to get through, Infinite Jest. All 1,100 pages of it. This is a book about tennis and addiction and entertainment, and it is 1,100 pages, with most of the book also including footnotes that you have to read to understand the book. I'm not going to go into too much depth about my thoughts while reading this book, or even about the book necessarily, because I plan to do a longer video talking about that by itself. But I did read this in April, and it's a story about a family that's a little bit dysfunctional. They all live at a tennis academy school, and also about a halfway house. And also it's like a dystopian kind of world where USA and Canada are combined. It was a little overwhelming, yes. I mean, imagine reading all of these pages and not being overwhelmed. But eventually, after maybe 200 pages or 300 pages, I stopped feeling so exhausted or dreading picking up the book, and I started to actually understand things that were going on in this, and I was able to enjoy the book, truly. It had some great points on masculinity and institutions and addiction, but I didn't necessarily love the way that race and gender were handled inside of it. But it's probably one of the most thought-provoking and engaging books that I've read this year so far, and I don't know if it'll be the most of the year. We'll find out. So I rated it a 4.5 out of 5. I would recommend this if you are up for the challenge, or if you're already curious about Infinite Jest. I would recommend this to you. Maybe read a couple 100 pages, and then if you are still confused and lost and you hate it, no shame in DNFing. I would not recommend this to anybody who wants an easy, passive, cozy read. This book demands your attention and your dictionary, and also is basically a workout just carrying this thing around to read it. I would avoid it if you're not up for those things. That's everything I read in April. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially on the ones that I'm a little bit on the edge about, what I should rate them. What I've read in May is already looking weird and chaotic, so look forward to that. What was the best book you read last month? Bye.